Yeah, I think Alan Lazard could end up being a trade candidate if teams looking for a veteran receiver
Jacob,
like the Vikings want someone.
Nobody wants Alan Lazard,
stopgap.
Jacob.
No
Nobody
one
wants
does,
Alan
but
Lazard.
sometimes you just need a veteran.
All right, we have Jacob Camenker here to talk about his wide receiver picks by tier. Now, Jacob, let's start off hot with the elite. There's a lot. You and I have had this discussion about elite receivers versus number one receivers and how there's kind of a difference there, right? For this pick, though, I think there's really no debate around this player. So tell us who you pick for your elite tier fantasy pick.
Yeah, it's Jamar Chase. He's clear-cut number one wide receiver in the league right now. Just the main thing with him, he has such great chemistry with Joe Burrow going back to their college days at LSU, makes him unstoppable. Add in his great speed, his ability to make contested catches, get open, separate. There's a lot to like about him. We've talked about this before. He could lead the league in touchdowns again. He could potentially get near 2,000 receiving yards. So if you're looking to pick a receiver early and Jamar Chase is on the board, run to the proverbial podium and get him on your team.
So, Jacob, I have a question for you, and this is a question I feel like I may have asked you before, but so Jamar Chase got paid and T. Higgins got paid, and the Bengals are still dealing with some contract stuff around Trey Hendrickson, but obviously he's on the defensive side of the ball. Do you feel I feel like Joe Burrow has done an excellent job of making sure all mouths are fed in that offense. Do you feel like there would be any kind of fallout from T. Higgins getting his contract, maybe forcing the ball a little bit, maybe taking some more targets away from Jamar Chase? How do you envision that chemistry playing out this season?
I don't think T. Higgins' contract is going to have a big impact because the Bengals are a really high volume passing offense, and they figure to be once again because, as you referenced, they still have some issues on defense. If Trey Hendrickson, if they can't work out that contract, they're not going to be able to stop people on that side of the ball, which means they're going to have to throw a lot and score a lot, which is something that the Bengals passing game does very well. So I think there's going to be plenty of targets to go around. Maybe Higgins will eat a little bit into Chase's target share, but Chase is the type of player who doesn't even need those like 10 plus targets per game he's been getting. If he gets 6 to 8 targets a game, he can still produce at the level of a top receiver. That's just how good he is. So I don't really have any worries about his production this season.
All right, Jacob, let's move on to your slept-on tier for wide receivers here. I'm a little surprised you don't have Alan Lazard. This is once again Jets disrespect. No, I'm just kidding. But tell us who you picked for your slept-on tier and why this player is slept on.
Yeah, I think Alan Lazard could end up being a trade candidate if teams looking for a veteran receiver
Jacob,
like the Vikings want someone.
Nobody wants Alan Lazard, Jacob.
No one does, but sometimes you just need a veteran. But going back to Courtland Sutton, he was great last year. He had his second best marks in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns in his career, 1,081 yards, 8 touchdowns. And he should only get better as Bo Nix continues to improve. So I like his chances of kind of taking that step forward. He got paid. He should be motivated to prove he deserved that contract. And look, Sean Payton, he's just a good head coach. He gets the most out of his players. So I think that Sutton is a guy you can get in that like wide receiver 20 to wide receiver 25 range who could end up being a top 12 guy at the position just because of his steadiness and consistency.
So here's a question for you. You mentioned Sean Payton. The other, I think, more important name in this equation is Bo Nix. Entering his second season, we know about the dreaded sophomore slump. That doesn't concern you at all?
I am mildly concerned about a Bo Nix sophomore slump, but the way his game works, he's very accurate for the most part. He doesn't have the biggest arm, but he can get the ball to his receivers, and Sutton's a pretty good guy at getting contested catches. He gets open as well, but he will make plays downfield. He will get open consistently enough that Nix will hit him. I think Nix could take a step back. He might have more turnover issues, as he kind of has that sophomore slump potential. But I still think Sutton's consistency just makes him a fantasy asset no matter what.
All right, Jacob, let's move on to your mid-round pick. Who'd you pick for your mid-round? It's an old friend of yours, we would say. So who did you pick for your mid-round pick?
Yes, so I picked Jakobi Meyers. Yes, former Patriot. Yes, I'm from New England. Yes, I really liked him as an undrafted free agent when he made the roster. But the reason I really like him this year, listen to the quarterbacks he played with last year, Joe. Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, Desmond Ridder. Despite this, he had career highs in receptions, 87, and receiving yards, 1,027. First 1,000-yard receiving season with those guys at quarterback. Geno Smith probably is an upgrade for him, as weird as that sounds to say. And he's just a guy who consistently gets open. So if you're in a PPR league, especially, and you can get Jakobi Meyers in that 7th to 9th round range, he's a guy you can plug in as your wide receiver 3 every week and just say, yep, this guy's going to be solid. Maybe he won't have the same ceiling as other guys, but his floor is elite. And you got to love that in fantasy when you're looking for those mid-round values.
All right, so I'm a little surprised. I'm looking over your list. No Rams wide receivers on this list. No Puka Nacua, no newly acquired Devontae Adams. Why does nobody between the elite slept on a mid-round? Why are they not there, Jacob?
So I'm mildly worried about Matthew Stafford's back. I know he's back at practice now, but back injuries tend to linger. Stafford's on the older side. We've seen when he's been injured in the past, especially with the Rams, him sort of not be able to finish the season. So I'm not saying he's not going to play this year. I think he'll play. I think he might play well. But I just think if you have him miss any time and Jimmy G goes in the lineup, the ceilings of Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams are a little bit lower than I would like for their draft range. So I think they could be good, but just in the ranges they're going, Puka kind of early second, maybe late first, and Devontae Adams in that 3rd to 4th round range. There are just other guys who I feel a little bit more certain about at this time. But if Matthew Stafford gets a cleaner bill of health, I might feel a little differently.
In your 30s with a bad back, I've never related to an NFL quarterback more. All right, Jacob, let's move on to late round picks. So Josh Palmer with the Bills. So kind of a sneaky acquisition this offseason for the Bills. We're gonna have to talk about this a little bit because we did have a discussion about this. But why is Palmer a safe late round pick?
Yeah, so I think you look at the Bills and Keon Coleman's getting a lot of love because it's his second year and he was, if not a late first round pick, the first pick of the second round. I can't remember which, but he's getting a lot of love. But I think Palmer might end up being a better fit for Joe Brady's offense. I think he's got a little more speed to his game and a little bit more ability to separate. And Joe Brady has Josh Allen throwing in the short to intermediate range more than taking those downfield shots where Coleman's size becomes kind of a big advantage. So I think Khalil Shakir and Josh Palmer are the receivers that might get open over the middle more. So I like his potential usage in this offense. And I just think that he's going to be able to shake loose a little bit. And, you know, given the opportunity in Buffalo, someone's going to have to produce. And I think Palmer will be that guy that kind of steps up as their number 2 receiver.
I think when you look at the Joe Brady offense, so much of it is designed around space, right? Is around spacing. Last year, by like 1/10 of a yard, Josh Allen had his lowest average depth of target from Pro Football Focus metrics. So in his career, which is a little surprising to me because when you think of Josh Allen, you think of a guy who's just going to launch, right? He has the launch coast and he's going to throw a 60-yard bomb. So I think Palmer makes a lot of sense there, but I'm still concerned about the usage in that offense. We've seen him feed Dawson Knox a lot. We've seen him feed Dalton Kincaid a little bit, and people are waiting for him to break out more as a first-round pick. But do you still looking at Palmer, like the level of concern there, if you had to put it on a scale of 1 to 10? I mean, I know you have him on here, but maybe a little bit lesser?
Yeah, I think you could probably, on a scale of 1 to 10, my concern level around him not panning out would be maybe a 4. So I think it's kind of a 50-50 shot if you're looking at a late round pick. But if you're taking a flyer on a guy who will have opportunities, I think Palmer's a good one. I know you mentioned the 2 tight ends. I'm just not willing to trust Dalton Kincaid this year. I was big in on him last year, and he really let me down. Maybe he'll prove me wrong this year. I know some people like him as a sleeper, but I'm a little scared of him. So I think Palmer could end up being that second target. But you're right. There is a world in which he ends up being like the 4th or 5th target on that offense, at which point, not fantasy relevant. But I would take a chance on him very late in the draft.
Especially now with James Cook having gotten paid. Let's not forget that, right? All right, Jacob. So this one's a little bit interesting. This was a little spicy to me. I like it. Tell us who you picked for your league winner.
Okay, so I'm going to make the case to you for Ricky Pearsall being the league winner at receiver. And
that sounds like a man who's not overly confident in what he just said, but continue, please.
I am confident. I was just trying to set the table, but it probably didn't come across confidently. But he had, look, last 2 games of the season last year, Pearsall had 14 catches, 210 yards, 2 touchdowns over 2 games. Over an entire NFL season, that would be 17 touchdowns and close to 1,700 yards. In fact, over 1,700 yards. So that type of production could be there for him. Probably doesn't live quite up to that, but the 49ers have a lot of opportunities open in their receiving core because Brandon Ayuk is injured and Deebo Samuel is gone. Those two combined to get 24% of the targets for the 49ers last year. Pearsall figures to eat into some of that workload. And if he can perform like he did late last season, all of a sudden he might be the team's number one or wide receiver, at which point he becomes a quality wide receiver 2 in fantasy. So you're getting a decent discount on him as a mid-round pick where he could end up being a top 25 player at his position. So I love him this year. I will be trying to draft him as much as possible. But I'm sure people who watch this video will try to take him from me whenever we have fantasy drafts together.